Brad Larsen grew up in Vernon, BC. At 16, he joined the Swift Current Broncos of the WHL, where he would be named an assistant captain in the second season and captain of the team at 18 and 19. At 17, he was a third-round draft pick of the Ottawa Senators. He has the distinction of winning back-to-back World Junior Championships with Team Canada in 1996, 1997, captaining that 97 team. Spoiler alert, okay, leadership's going to be a big theme of this conversation. Brad turned pro with the Colorado Avalanche. He joining the Hershey Bears, where in his second season, you guessed it, he was named the program's captain. And following a 13-year pro career that saw him suit up for 294 NHL games, Brad immediately jumped into the coaching arena as an assistant coach with the Springfield Falcons, the affiliate of the Columbus Blue Jackets. He would eventually get the call to join Columbus, where after 7 seasons as an assistant coach, he was named the club's head coach in 2001. He joins us today as a member of the Calgary Flames coaching staff. Please help me welcome Brad Larsen. Let's go. Good to see you, man. How you doing?
It sounded really good.
Well, that's why we gotta sometimes need some assistance telling your own story. We talked earlier in the week, and I said, hey, when you leave Columbus to drive up here, like, shoot me a text. I said the show's getting going at 9 a.m. on the ice. You were here at 8:45. You do the math. It's about a 4-hour drive. Early riser. Is that normal?
Yeah, I get up at 4 a.m. usually every day. It's not a pat on your back type thing. I've always been an early riser. Even when I played, I didn't set an alarm. Generally, most of our practices were at 10 or 11. Usually we get up at 6, but it's one of those things. Now, during the season, it's different.
Yeah.
You know, you fly in, you land, you get home at 3. I'm not getting up at 4. But I've found as a coach, and time management's a very big thing.
Yeah.
Especially when having a family, and I love the peace and quiet. I like to talk. I'm very passionate about hockey, but there's a lot of work that has to get done. So if I usually get to the rink around 5 a.m., there's nobody there. So usually I have my coffee, have a little quiet time. I get into my work, and I have a two hours head start on a lot of things, and then I can have the conversations I need to have.
In those 2 hours, what kind of work gets done in that time?
Well, like I said, and I'm sure we'll hit on it, I'm a man of faith, so I get into the Word right away.
Yeah.
Sometimes longer than others, depending how the team is doing. But then I get into my work, and like I said, it's either review from the night before, whether special team, individual, whatever that is. But I can get a good bulk of it done. Like when there's nobody around, it's really nice, and no distractions, which is great. So
on Thursday, it's Game 4, Stanley Cup Finals, and we get back to our place, our whole staff. We run out these townhomes by Yost Arena, and we turn the game on, and it's 3-0. And this week's a bit of a grind, so I'm like, you know what, guys, this one's over. I'm gonna go to bed, and I'm laying in bed, and all of a sudden I hear, and then again, and I'm like, oh my God, and I roll over and I check my phone, and I'm like, oh my God, it's 3-3. Like I should probably missing a good one, and then obviously saw the finish the next morning. But for somebody that is coaching in the National Hockey League, that's played in the National Hockey League, when I can only imagine how many hours you spend watching tape, but when you get an opportunity to maybe not as a fan, but maybe observe a game without having a dog in the fight, what do you observe during these playoffs, and what maybe stands out to you as?
I like to just enjoy it as a fan.
Yeah?
I do. I had a stretch of 26 straight years in pro hockey as playing and coaching, and then I took a gap year there just due to some of my wife's health issues, and then restarted. But I really found just to appreciate the game, not dissect it. And it's really hard when you've been in coaching for a long time to watch a game, because I'm looking at D-zone arrival and how he exits. You look at the last goal, Barkov turns over, like, gosh, you can't turn it over there. I know you got, these things that you really, I like to just watch the sport. Like the thing that comes to mind when I watch the series, it's just a heavy game. It's a heavy game. It's an intense game. And I wouldn't even say there's a hate. I just think there's two teams that are so hungry to win.
Yeah.
And you're watching that, and that for me, it's like a coach's dream. I think Paul Maurice was quoted to say, "This is like Christmas," even though they lost that game.
Yeah.
this is what you work for, to watch everybody here, I'm sure, watch the Four Nations, right? That's your dream, to watch the best players in the world play with that kind of intensity. So when you get to this level and this spot now, I just try to watch it for the purity of the game and how it's supposed to be played. And the best part, because it's not about perfection. Yeah. It's about will. And that's a hard thing to teach. You know, you can talk about playoffs, you can talk about the intensity, but, and I'm sure we'll hit it, but there's no substitute for experience. You have to go through it sometimes and feel what that pressure feels like, because pressure does funny things to people, you know, and you'll see the best sometimes sink, other guys, unknowns rise, and that's the beauty of our sport. Is it's a total team effort, and you watch it, and it's just I don't know, I just have an appreciation for what has to go into that.
I love how you talk about the imperfection in the game. That's certainly a theme that I think that's come out over the last few days as coaches just talking about, like, you can't coach for absolutes. You have to appreciate that this is a read and react game, and you can't predict what's going to happen next. While we're on the subject, any inkling on how the next 3 games are going to play out?
No.
Okay.
Honestly, I've had a friend ask me, he's in radio, and he's like, what do you think? I'm like, I really don't know. And I mean, I was a lot like you. I watched it was 3-0. I'm going, man, that is not the start Edmonton was looking for, right? And they chip away, and all of a sudden now they got to score with under 20 seconds left, right? Florida. So your guess is as good as mine. You're going to get 2 good teams that are just they're laying it on the line. So I don't know what it's going to be. I really don't.
I touched in your intro. You were. And I think I've got this correct. So you go to Swift Current in the Western Hockey League, assistant captain at 17, which is very rare. Captain for 2 seasons, captain of the World Junior team. Your second year pro, you're named the captain in Hershey. You know, captain again later in Portland. When was the first time, if you recall, that somebody referred to you as a leader?
Well, I'll even go back to when I was 15. I left home at 15, which I don't recommend for anybody who has kids. I wouldn't do that to them anymore. Yeah. It was a lot. But I did that, and so I'm playing with 20-year-old guys and 21-year-olds and 19s. And about 12 games into the year, I got named assistant captain that year as a 15-year-old by our coach, and I was shocked. I was nervous.
Yeah,
it was crazy. But one thing my dad really taught me, it wasn't really about your mouth, it's about your actions, right? I mean, your actions will speak a lot for you. Yeah. From there on, I kind of was put in that position. Now, and I'll say this with total honesty and humility, I don't think I was that great a captain for a lot of years. The way I look at perceived leadership now, it's not regrets, it's just the unknowns. I just didn't know. Yeah. And so if I could go back to my younger self from what I know now and how to lead, or seeing such great leaders. I was fortunate to play in Colorado with the Avalanche, and I watched Joe Sakic be a captain. Like that's a captain. I've watched, I played with Patrick Waugh, and there was Ray Bork, and there was, depending on the audience, that may not mean anything. If there's those smoldered folk in here, you'll enjoy those players. But
do you know who Ray Bork is? No,
come on,
unbelievable, man.
Really? Yeah, that's what happens, right? You get a little bit old. Yeah. But anyways, these guys were, one, they were welcoming. As far as I was a bit part, I was playing on the 4th line, playing 6 minutes, but they made me feel important. The Rob Blakes of the world. Now, you may know Rob Blake as the GM that just got let go in LA. Well, I played with Rob Blake, who was a premier defenseman at the time. But these guys made you feel important. So as a guy that had a very limited role, to see the examples in practice and in the gym, and then their desire to win and the challenging, how they held each other accountable was incredible. That was a gift to watch. Yeah. And in real time, gosh, I could spend a half hour just telling you some of the stories on that, and that stuck with me. I wasn't that good an NHL player. I was very, very thankful and grateful to have a little bit of a career. Because you said I played 294, I think it was 300 with playoffs, but I also played 400 something in the American League, so I was longer there, But to watch that from what I consider these Hall of Famers, the best of the best, and watch them challenge each other. That stuck with me my whole career. It really did.
How do you think obviously there's an audience full of coaches, but when you talk about, the word culture comes up a lot, and I think sometimes we it's a word we say often, but it's tougher to define, right? How do you think as coaches we can create an environment where, the players can not only challenge themselves, but at the same time make sure that nobody in the room is left behind?
Yeah, gosh, that's another one we could talk for 30 minutes on. So culture, right? It's a real great buzzword. So I'm going to steal this from John Tortorella. So if you don't know, I coached with him for 6 years. In my second year in Columbus, Todd Richards got let go, nature of the business, and John came in, and I didn't know Torts at all. And I remember going home to my wife going, I might be getting fired here too in the next week, I don't know. But we hit it off instantly.
Really?
Yeah. I actually made a call to a coach that was with him in Vancouver, and he said, Lars, I'm telling you, whatever you've heard about him, it's wrong. He's like, you're going to love working with this guy. So not that everybody says bad things, but he comes with this reputation and persona, and it's so far from the truth. So I'll go back to your question. When we talk about culture, there's no coach in this room or in the NHL that doesn't come in and go, hey, we're, the big buzz, we got to get our culture right. The thing that I learned from Torts was, he calls it standard, and there's a big difference between standard and culture. And in my opinion, the standard is the standard, and once you set that standard, there's no wiggle room, and that's what he's famous for. And he upholds the standard, and it doesn't matter star player or not. And I watch it, and it's not just from yelling and screaming and kicking doors and that. He has a defined care for his players, but there's also a standard. And there's this line that we need to draw as coaches, I believe, especially now with how the players are coming in. And, we've heard presentations on the why, and we got to, building relationships. So there's a side here that we are performance-based. That's what it is. We have to get them to perform. But you also have to care about them because, and you can't force that. You either do that and you have to do it genuinely. Yeah. And I saw it with Torts, and I saw it as something that I've always, as a player, appreciated. And I think I was brought into an organization in Colorado where the top players really cared about you. It didn't matter what your role was. There was not one unimportant role. And so that's something I always wanted to try and bring in as a coach. If I ever got a head coach, is to make sure that I had a definition of the two. Like, yes, I need performance, but I am going to care about how can I help you? What does that look like? And for so many of them, it's different. They're human beings first. Yeah. They are. We forget that so much. The jersey goes on, and nobody cares if you're sick. Nobody cares if you've had a rough day at home. Nobody cares if you're having family issues or someone died. Your kids are having struggles. They don't know it. Yeah. So you got to get them to open up and talk about it at times, and so that is a real important part. I think when, at least that's what I try to present with my players is that how can I help you first? And yes, I'm going to have to help you perform, but it's so important that the standards is upheld, and they have to know you care. Yeah. Because it is, and you have to do it in 2.5 years. I think that's the stat now for a head coach, right? Something about that.
We heard that earlier. It was funny. Ryan Blank, who was on the stage, and he works extensively in the National Football League, and he brought up his perception is that NFL coaches had a short shelf life, and I think the average tenure is just over 4 years. And he did the research. He's like, yeah, it's just over 2 in the NHL, which is, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's in a funny time.
Yeah,
real funny time right now, and because there was a time where I think none of the head coaches were getting fired. There was only a couple or something. So I think it goes in waves too. But yeah, it's, you have to build relationships. And this is why I'll say this, as you build a staff, don't just get yourself, right? Yeah. You have to build, some guys are better at connecting and doing this and doing maybe the things that you don't have time for as a head coach. And that's not a cop-out. It's just, as the head coach, there's a lot of things you have to take care of, especially at the highest level.
Well, I think your time, we talk about the tenure of coaches. I think your time in Columbus is a really good example where, you were an assistant coach in Springfield, head coach for 2 years, have a great run, especially your first season. You get called up to Columbus as an assistant coach. halfway through your second year, as you mentioned, Todd Richards is let go, John Tortorella steps in, Bradshaw joins the staff, and then it's like this 4-year build to getting to the playoffs. But I think the key word there, it took 4 years to build that. It wasn't 2 years, and success rarely in any endeavor is up and to the right. Right? There's ups and downs. But while you're going through that growth as a team, what might have been some of the the building blocks that you look back on in hindsight and say, like, those were really important steps that we just there was no way to avoid it. You had to go through those to grow.
Yeah, I think, again, and I'll reference back to Torts, one of his greatest assets, I believe, is his ability to identify players that are going to be able to get you to that next level and abide by the standard. Now, there is a marriage here, because what you understand is, you create the standard, or you certainly try to as a staff, or you can call it culture, whatever you want to call it. But what I've learned very, very, in the hard way at times, is that you're at the mercy of your top players. I mean, they are the ones that literally carry the standard, because you can scream, yell, hug, cry, have a beer with them, have a coffee, take them out, talk. But if they're not willing to push out of their comfort zone, that's your ceiling. It really is, because they're the ones that they're the game breakers. They're
How
the
do you
ones.
sell that?
Well, you don't. I don't like the word sell.
Okay.
I think that's, how do you create that? How do you create selflessness? How do you create that team first mentality? How do you get that total buy-in, right? And it's a really hard thing to do, especially at the NHL, when you're talking about analytics and the money getting thrown around and they're watching their friends get paid and this. So there's a lot of things that you're battling with that. So if you're fortunate enough to get some of the, I'll throw it like a Sidney Crosby, right? He's a dedicated, obviously one of the best players to play.
For sure.
He is setting the standard.
Yeah.
It's not that Mike Sullivan's not a great coach. He's a fantastic coach.
Yeah.
But he also has one of the best tools in his toolbox, and that's Sidney Crosby, right?
So go out and find a Sidney
That's
Crosby.
right. So you just need Sidney Crosby or Connor McDavid. He probably knows Connor McDavid, this guy.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right. So I think, again, it's not a cop-out. It's not saying, well, if you don't have it, you can't create a standard. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that certainly helps. And I'll go back to your question before. It's building relationships.
Yeah.
It's letting, how do you build trust? The thing about relationships, like if anybody's here that's married, it's built over time. There's ups and there's downs, right?
True story.
So when you go through things, that is when the character is revealed. It truly is. And most of us don't do it right all the time, me included. Failed tons and still failing now. But hopefully, if you're humble enough, you learn from that situation, or you're smart enough to listen, and then you grow. Because that's when you grow. You grow in those moments of dissension and conflict. And because Torts used to always say this, you're going to hear a lot of Torts references here. Conflict is a good thing if handled properly.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. And he's the first to admit he hasn't always handled it properly, right? So it's not about doing it perfectly. As I said, it's about learning from maybe some of those missteps and going, okay, this is a different situation. But when you go through those moments, the tense moments, that's the opportunity to grow. And that's where I go back to that standard.
Yeah.
That's when we can come together, right? So they grow now as leaders and go, yeah, we can go through that. We can withstand that. And in that 4-year period you're talking about, we kind of got rid of some guys and they grew as a group.
Yeah.
We had an identity. We knew who we were, and they added the pieces. And also we had some great players, obviously, Bobrovsky and Panarin, added Matt Duchene at the deadline, and we already had the Felinos in the career in the end. We had a really good team, Seth Jones, Werenski, and we were really close. We swept Tampa.
We're going to get to that, yeah.
All right, sorry, I won't. Spoiler alert, we swept Tampa. But yeah, it was a grind. Like it was 4 years of every day in standard and no wiggle room on that. We left, I don't know how many times we left people at the rink on the bus going to the airport. Bus leaves at 10:30.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Captains, doesn't matter who it is, you're not on the bus, we go, and they are getting their Ubers and they're paying them double to get them there on time. Oh, yeah.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
But that was the standard.
Yeah.
That was it.
Well, two things I want to unpack there. The first one is, when you make the reference to being in a marriage, I can certainly relate to this, but you said you got to listen. So this is what I predict is going to happen. And sometimes I fear that this is the, we'll call it, the dark side of the coach's site. As you come to an event like this, you go on our website, you get all this information. So what do you want to do? You want to go in front of your team and you want to share it all with them. And all of a sudden it becomes a one-way conversation. But you mentioned the importance of listening. How do you implement listening as a skill, let's call it?
Are you asking my wife, or?
I'm asking you as a coach, or maybe what you've learned
She's
from
not
Hannah.
Here,
Yeah,
good.
Yeah, okay.
Good, because I'm a really good
I'm just going to warn you, this is going to be on the World Wide Web shortly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, I failed in that still.
Yeah.
Daily. Oh gosh, how do you? You know what? It's a numbers game. Right?
Yeah.
2 years, one mouth.
Yeah.
Right. So you got 2 years, use them. And again, it really comes back to humility. When you're around, there's a lot of great people in this game, and not just at the NHL level, at all levels, college, youth. There's so many things that we can learn, and if you're humble enough to just listen, you might get a great nugget from something. It may not be everything, but I really believe it's not trying to be the smartest man in the room. You're able to say, when a player comes to you and asks you a question, you're like, I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, I remember I had a video coach say to me, you can't let them know you don't know the answer. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Why? So just lie about it or make something up? That doesn't make sense to me. So if the players hear that you don't have all the answers, because we don't.
Yeah.
It does build bridges, right? And but yeah, I just think it all starts with yourself and your ego and your pride and humility. If you're wise enough to just use the 2 years, and I think it goes a long way. Well
said. You also touched on that during that time in Columbus, you had an identity, and then that was, it appears that was communicated to the players, but. I can just recall Bruce Cassidy. We did a live event with him not a couple of seasons ago, but it was the season after they won the Cup. And I asked him about it. Like, I believe it was an 8 or 9 game losing streak that they went through that season with the Cup run. And I think the instinct is, just as humans, is like when you go through something like that, you're like, oh, like. That identity or whatever we defined as the path forward, this is the sign that we need to change it. No doubt that there were some growing pains with that group in Columbus that eventually led to some success that we'll touch on in a sec. But what were the conversations in the coaching room to say to just be steadfast and stick with that team identity?
Well, I think one of the guys was up here, just was one of the youth guys. I don't know his name, I apologize, but he was saying, you have the plan, execute the plan.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And here's the thing about the standard, is it sounds awesome in August and in July and September when there's nothing on the line. So, and again, I think somebody said they don't really like the word accountability, and I understood why. I do like the word accountability for a lot of reasons, but accountability, everybody loves until it's them.
Yeah.
So, but once the standard's set, that's it. Like there's no wiggle room, and it doesn't matter what the player is.
Yeah.
We're all smart enough to understand some guys have more rope. As Torts had said, I'm going to use another Torts reference. Yeah. He's got a little bit more in the bank. Right?
Yeah. That's a great way to frame it, too.
He does. Whether he's got years in the league, he's putting up 90 points, he gets a little bit more rope. Players understand that.
Yeah.
But the non-negotiables, the intensity, the compete. Like, we showed a lot of compete clips or non-compete clips, and not to belittle, but going, this isn't up to the standard. And most players don't, and we didn't show a lot of negative stuff. It was teaching, but they have to see it. If those are the things that are part of your standard, you show it, and you show it, and you show it, and you practice it, and you live it daily. Spring of 2019, the Tampa Bay Lightning
win the President's Trophy, first place in the National Hockey League. The Columbus Blue Jackets qualified for the playoffs for the first time in a long time on the second to last game of the regular season. You guys, you're the 8th seed, Tampa's the 1st seed. You meet in the first round. If I recall, you're down 3-0 in the first, I think,
First period, yep.
in the first period. What happens next?
Oh, yeah. Well, even go back. The season series, we got outscored 21-4. So it even looked worse than you presented it.
Okay, all right.
Torts put me on the task. He's like, look, I want you to watch our game. So I watched every game.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, we had a lot of good minutes in that. And I know it sounds silly, but they are a dangerous team. They're very opportunistic.
Yeah.
Obviously, their record speaks for itself. But I felt like Vasilevsky is a great equalizer. 88 does a really good job in there when they make mistakes.
Yeah.
So we felt like it wasn't all bad. There were some really good things, and we knew we were going to have to play above the puck. Like they had to go through 5 guys all series long, and we had to take every opportunity to be physical. That Josh Anderson, who now is in Montreal, I think he hit Hedman 14 times in the first game. And I think by game 2 he was done.
Yeah.
I think that was it. So game 1, yeah, we're down 3-0. They get a breakaway early in the second, would have been 4-0. Bob makes a big save shortly after. Nick Foligno scores. Shortly after, we score again, make it 3-2. We get a shorthanded goal, Josh Anderson, and then I remember David Savard coming down, toe drag. Gosh, he barely scores, and he just rips one, 4-3. We win that game. And I remember watching their press conference after, and it was very, we just kind of let one slide. We'll be all right.
Yeah.
Game 2 is where we won the series. I can tell you right now. We went game 2, we punched them in the mouth. They didn't have anything and that's the game that Kucherov was frustrated, took a suspension. Again, this is all in my opinion. You got to understand they have
No, totally, yeah.
But that's where I felt like we won the series. Was game 2, is because that home game I felt like they thought they were gonna walk all over us, and we stood our ground and won that game, and then came home, and game 3 was crazy. Game 4 was lights out. So that was a big moment for Columbus Blue Jackets.
No, and I think, like, in my opinion, like, that was just a reminder, like, in a world where so much of our lives are curated, like, sports is just, that's why it's the best theater, and that was such a great example of that. I want to go back when you talk about the strategy, when you mentioned we knew that we had to have players above the puck, and we had to make them go through 5 players. Everybody here is capable of doing that with their teams. Like, that's not complex. Is there a value in particularly when you're facing a tough opponent, that maybe you don't need 6 strategies in your pocket, but if you can get the players focused on to do one thing really well, that in some cases that might be, you might get more out of that.
Well, and that'll go back to your identity, right? So we can all strategize, and everybody has their systems, and there's nothing wrong with foundation. But if you listen to coaches at the end of most of the games, what are they saying? It wasn't our neutral zone was. It's like we weren't competitive enough. We didn't win enough puck battles. We didn't, execution. Like it's very rarely is it about the foundation or their structure. Yes, there's stuff we're harping on every day, and we're touching with video, and practice time in the NHL is at a premium. We just don't have time. It's rest versus work all the time, especially with travel. So the competitiveness is, and those intangibles will always supersede the structure. They will. You have to have structure. Don't get me wrong. But when you're watching Florida and Edmonton right now, this is a game of will at this point. This is not, they're not well coached, or their structure's off, or they're just not. They're, they have their games. They get blown out 6-1. That's an easier game to get over than losing 3-2 in double overtime.
That's a great point.
It really is. We weren't good. We were off. It's just one of those nights.
Move on. Turn the page.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting now. I go to that series because they had a 3-0 lead. They come back, they tie it. Now it's bang, it's 2-2. Is that a missed opportunity? Time will tell. We got potentially 3 more games for this story to end. But
let's hope so.
Yeah, no, I'd love to see a game 7 again. But this is what I'm saying. Those intangibles. And so for all the coaches out there, that's important. Like that's important in your video, how you articulate that, how you're bringing that into practice. You can't have 7 competitive drills in a practice where it's total compete, because you're burn your players out. You guys are going to get elbowed in the head. But I would bring at least one element every practice of some kind of compete. I'm not seeing that 10-year-olds or 11-year-olds. Make sure, I don't know if there's youth coaches out here.
But there's a method you can do that.
Absolutely. I think
with your group,
you need to foster that, and you have to create that environment with your players so you can carry it into a game.
You know, we're gonna go move on to you know, getting named the head coach in Columbus. But I think before we get to that, I'd like to go back to, I believe it was training camp 2007. You're with the Atlanta Thrashers. NHL players, before the season starts, they all have to go through a routine physical. You went through yours. You got some news.
Yeah. So I've been in pro hockey for a long time, and it was the only time I've had this. You know, and I do believe the good Lord was looking out for me. I was a sun baby growing up. I always was outside and at the beach or at the pool after my workouts and that. So anyways, I'm at camp, and I'm waiting in line for ortho, and there's 6 or 7 guys, and there's a gentleman, a doctor over there. He's a dermatologist waiting by himself. It's optional if you want to get checked. And I'm like, why not, right? I'm in the sun a lot, so I go see him, and he checks me out, flips me over on my back, and he's like, yeah, we might want to check this spot out. Swipes it, get a call 2 days later. He's like, get down to the office now.
No way.
And I was borderline stage 3 melanoma.
Oh my God.
And so they swiped it. I had surgery. I got a big Z in the top of my back now, but there's no way I was going by myself to a dermatologist. You're young and think you're invincible, and that was a blessing, because
no kidding.
Had he not been there, I wasn't going on my own. So who knows where we got to? But yeah, that was a wake-up call for sure.
So then, you know, you go through that experience. You go into remission, get back in shape, you resume your career. A couple years later, you notice a lump on your testicle.
Yeah. Testicular cancer, my last year pro. I was just getting ready to go into playoffs, and I felt a lump and got checked out, and he's like, yeah, I think it's pretty sure 90% this is cancer. So we went into playoffs. I didn't tell anybody. I mean, my wife knew, but we did the play. We got lost, or we got beat in the first round, which is probably a good thing. And then I had surgery within days after that. But yeah, then had to do the radiation and all that afterwards. But again, the second time with cancer, 3 strikes you're out, I think, right? So hopefully that's it for me.
Well, like, listen, I a couple thoughts. Like, one, I lost my mom to cancer in 2013, and the one thing that, you know, I took away from that experience was that, you know, the best humans on the planet are in those cancer hospitals and working that and dealing with that on a day-to-day. But I try and put myself in your shoes, and I'm like, gosh, like going through that once. And you're a young man. You're at an age where this is not supposed to happen to you. You're healthy. I would assume that, you know, you've done all the things you're supposed to do to avoid that circumstance, but it happens to you once. But the second time, like, what's your mindset at that point to get through that? To not, I guess, internalize it and say that, like, you know, the world's out to get me.
Yeah, you know what? It was weird. So again, I mentioned earlier that, you know, I'm a man of faith, and that came later in my life. And I'll be honest, it wasn't due to the cancer.
Yeah.
I still had an athlete's mentality at that point. I'm like, no problem. And I had really got good news when I got the prognosis. It was like, hey, we can get over this. I think you're going to be okay. May 22nd, 2011 is when I gave myself to the Lord. And that changed everything for me in just my lenses in life. But I do believe that certainly played a role as far as, you know, you're not invincible.
Yeah.
You start asking questions, you know. And because I didn't grow up in a house of faith or anything like that, and I left home at 15, and I was my own boss. I don't recommend that for anybody at 15 years old. It was quite a journey, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, you could say regrets or, you know, but I look back on those and I go, I think now I can be very relatable.
Yeah.
I was very resistant to the thought of God or faith at that point, and now I understand why. But but I'm just very appreciative and have so much gratitude to just be here and be able to do something that I love. Hockey's always been, I grew up typical Canadian kid, this tall, and I had no idea that this could actually make a living from it. And I'm going in my 28th year pro, and I still can't believe it. I've been longer in pro than out of pro now, and it's just now my lens is much different. I look forward to just helping these players, helping the head coach, the organization. Like, how can I serve them? How can I help them best? Just be the best versions of themselves for the team.
So, I'm going to turn 45 next month. And, I've come to appreciate, like, in my time on this earth, that, faith takes on many different forms.
Yep.
And I think that, whatever that form is to each of us as individuals, that it helps us accept the things that we can't control and sustain a belief that things are going to work out in the future. Coaching is, I believe anyways, that it's more about the things we can't control than what we can. And I mean, we're all watching presentations for the last few days on things that we can try and control. But as you've navigated your coaching career and you go through the grind of an 82-game season, like, just how has faith maybe helped you process things that I'm sure in the moment can feel like, it's the end of the world, or that the game is everything?
Sure, yeah. Well, it comes down to identity, right?
Yeah.
I'm a man of faith first, and then I'm fortunate enough to have a family, and then I get to have a job that I love to do, and what I mean? It's just prioritizing things in life. So here's full disclosure. When I got fired from Columbus, my second year, first year was, we knocked it out of the park. We were supposed to finish bottom 5. We were 500 team, they said, listen, we blew it out of the water. Yeah. The next year was a disaster.
You guys had a ton of injuries, though.
Oh, gosh. We had 430 man games lost, and nobody talks about Alexander Texier. He was a top 9 player for me who was gone for the year. So really, we had 500 and something. But here's what I learned from that experience is frustration took over, and resentment and anger. And, I am a man of faith at that point. But I learned so much from that, from that experience and how I handled it. Now, there's a lot that went into that season that went wrong, but there's a lot that I learned on how I would treat that situation again. I worried so much about what we didn't have rather than what we did have. My communication with my general manager, I did a poor job of that. I can't rely on him to come to me. There's ways we could have built bridges rather
managing
than
up.
So when we'd have discussions about structure, what's going on, and me piping off going, look, I have 3 defensemen that are under 6 feet tall. Like, we can't kill a play. Like, it's not helping. Yeah. Right? That frustration was, I just believe it's a wasted emotion. I really do. It just distracts you from what the solution could be. Yeah. So taking frustration, park that and go, okay, let's sift through. Let's listen to what he's saying. Yeah. Right? Hear him first. Let's try and come up with a plan. Let's execute that plan. And that's now, as we go through 82 games, when the highs and lows that they talk about, it's like, all right, instead of them being like this, it's just like, all right, where are we at? Are we sticking to the plan? What's the solution here? There's no point getting frustrated. The worst time to talk about the game is after the game, good or bad. You know what I mean? There's so much emotion that goes into a game, and
that's great advice.
So you just got to be very, let's reconvene, let's sleep on it, let's talk in the morning. I think that helps. Yeah. There's no substitute for experience. There's just not, and not all of it's going to be great. I say this, winning is easy. Not that it's easy to win. Winning's fun. I mean, your problems are smaller, everybody's having a great time, the laughs are better, the food tastes better, But the losing is the other side of it. So, and that's when a lot of things are revealed on the bottom end of that, and that's when, again, you can grow. And I hope that from those experiences that where I believe I could have handled it better, that now I can help and go, hey, we're in a bad spot, but let's look for a solution rather than just focus on this massive problem that we think we have.
No, man, I love that. And so you look back, and again in Springfield, you have a great start there as a head coach. you know, you have a great year, first year in Columbus as the head coach. What did you do well? Like, what would you point to and say that these are the things that you just naturally excelled at? Or that you think you did well? I know, like, they'll also say this, like, across the board, NHL coaches, like, you are all the humblest folks, like, ever.
Well, I don't even know how to answer that.
Yeah, there you go.
I'll say this, you know, a piece of advice I got when I first started was, don't try to be something you're not. Don't try to, just be who you are.
Yeah.
And so I believe, even in my 2 years, even in, you know, where I learned and probably got frustrated, but I always tried to be who I believe I'm supposed to be, and to trying to draw that line, to care for the players, try and get the performance out of them, but draw that line. Always. That no matter what, I'm there for you first as a human being, as a person. And yes, I need you to perform, but please separate the two, because they are two different things in my opinion. So I believe in that. I think I did that. I think I stayed true to who I was. In as far as like trying to care for my staff, for my players. And sometimes it doesn't work out. And again, you got to take ownership. Like, I wasn't perfect. Like, I shared a couple stories. There was more horror stories of how I think that season could have been handled, and I didn't do a great job at it.
Well, you know, I've shared this anecdote on the podcast before. I mean, I'll share it again. Like, anybody here ever have bad days? Okay. I have bad days once in a while, and when I do, I think just the nature of the work we do, I generally have this voice inside my head that says, well, at least your bad day isn't on the front page of the paper and all over social media, and, you know, it's not made public to everybody, including your friends and family. And I mean, you just talk about that, like, you know, that adversity. Not only are you, I'm assuming you're obviously dealing with it in the room, you're dealing with it at home, but then it probably feels like your world is the entire city of Columbus, if not, you know, the entire hockey community. But everybody's just, you know, got you under a magnifying glass. How do you deal with that, or how have you learned to deal with that?
Well, it is what it is, right? And now, Columbus is a little different than Toronto, or you know what I mean? So I felt like I was pretty lucky in Columbus. But I shared that story with you. I got fired, you know, and I had a pretty good sense it was coming. They say you'll know when you're going to get fired. They're right. You know when you're going to get fired. I had a really good feeling. So I got fired that morning. The meetings got all changed around. All of a sudden, I'm first in the meeting. We had some, again, I didn't handle the situation well. I had some choice words probably I should want to take back. We've since amended that, so it's good. But within 30 minutes, I called my wife, said, hey, I'm out. I got fired. And her phone's blowing up. Because we don't do social media, and it's not because I'm old and archaic. I mean, I don't need anybody telling me what's going on in the room. I'm there. I get to see it every day, so I don't do the social media stuff. But my wife was getting pinged from all her friends. You know, and so my family has to live it. You know, when I talk about the NHL, it's a great job, but there's a cost to it. There really is, and your family, they're living it live. And so I took my son to practice that night. Walking in, and his poor parents and teammates are looking at me. Ty, my son, they're looking at me. They won't look me in the eye. They're like, how you doing, coach? I'm like, well, it's been a rough day. I had 2 kids. This is funny. So there's this pair of twins, really neat kids. And so I go to the rink, and everyone's a little bit nervous. I'm like, it's all right. We're okay. And the 2 twins come up, and they literally will ask you anything. Anything. Hey, coach, can we ask you a question? Yeah, sure. What's going on? So you got fired today. I'm like, yep, got fired today. Love it, right? 11-year-olds just dead. Yeah, I got fired today. They're like, yeah, it must have been hard. I'm like, yeah, it's been a rough day. They go, well, I guess, but you're a big part of the reason, I guess, too. And I'm like, yep, yes, I was. Talk about humility. I'm like, hey, give me a hug, guys. You know, so.
That's awesome.
Yeah, you know what? It brings you back to earth, and it's a job, right? And it's a job I love. But at the end of the day, once I got over the frustration and that stuff, you're like, you know what? Life moves forward. It does. So when I got fired in the morning, my son still had hockey that night, and we're going to hockey. So we went to hockey, and we work through it, and it's all good.
I think you touched on it earlier. With the Flames, you took a leave of absence this year, and your wife Hannah, she was dealing with her own cancer diagnosis, and I'll allow you to go into that as much as you feel comfortable. But again, this is just through the sliver of a lens that I get to see into the National Hockey League, and it's like when that 82 game schedule gets going, it's like you get blinders on, and my impression is for a lot of folks in your profession, like they couldn't tell you a lot about current events or what the top song is on the music charts. It's just like next game, it's on to Cincinnati, right? And when you go through something like that as a family, because life happens to you, and I think that we all have players that have a life outside the rink. Like, how much did that mean that the Calgary Flames gave you the space to go deal with that and be a husband and a father first?
They were amazing. It got news, and I won't elongate the story, but my wife got diagnosed with a melanoma tumor in her eye, and it was sudden. We didn't see it coming. That was early December. I went home that next day, and then I ended up staying the rest of the season. Just we had some other things go on. So we had a house fire a week after her surgery. It was just crazy stuff that went on. But life hit you. It becomes real quick. And again, it's not like you need those major events to put life into perspective. You hope that you have perspective before those major things hit.
Yeah,
it'll help you in those major things. And we haven't handled everything perfectly. We're human too.
Yeah.
And it's hard and it's difficult. But the Calgary Flames, how they handled it, they were amazing. There was no questions asked. It was go home, take care of your family, and I was there from December 7th right till the end of the year. And I'm going back this year by the grace of God, and going to coach this year. But yeah, that was a really tough 5.5 months or so. But they stood by you know, and I'm very, very appreciative of that.
I bet. I also know too. This just occurred to me, like just thinking of your bio, like, and Ryan Huska has been amazing to us. He was our first ever presenter. He was here 2 years ago as well, right after he got named the head coach of the Flames. But I thought it was really maybe not a coincidence that in his second season he reached out to somebody that had that as a head coach, and that just what a valuable voice. And I think it just goes to show you that. Not being afraid to surround yourself with people that maybe have different experiences, or in some cases a bit more experience, because they can, that's something that you can lean on. And we'll be quicker. We want to get to some questions from the audience, but I saw you guys play earlier in the season in Calgary, and it really stood out to me that you just had this sort of lunch. You talk about an identity, like just this lunch bucket mentality. I look back at your career. I think one of the most insightful things I've ever heard. I used to be in the agent business a while back, and you go to the game and you sit in the scouting room, so you hear the scouts and all that. And I forget who the scout was, but he made this comment, and it was basically that for every player, he goes, you take away the Crosbys and the McKinnons, McDavids and McKinnons. But he's like, you take those players away, but he goes, after that, for every player that makes it, there's 3 players with the same talent that don't make it. And there's a whole host of reasons why. And one of those reasons is because players can't adapt to a role. You seem to be a player that was able to accept a role, probably not the role that you envisioned when you were playing road hockey as a kid, scoring the winning goal in overtime. But it seems like that's really become, those types of players have become the identity in Calgary. How do you foster that and help players to say, hey, like, this may not be the thing you want to do, but this is the thing that the team needs you to do. And also, this might be the thing that you're going to earn a living on, that is going to affect, give you, generational wealth down the road.
Yeah, and again, that could be a whole podcast just on that topic. So I had a player in the American League when it was my first year head coach. His name was Andrew Judry. Just a journeyman in the American League, worked tremendously hard. I just loved him. He was an assistant captain, could easily have been our captain that year. And, in the American League, it's always difficult. I feel like there's 4 seasons. Everybody gets sent down. It's the only team in the league nobody wants to be on. really.
That's a good, yeah.
You get all these players and they just got sent down, right?
And then you're battling against each other for the
hearts
call.
got ripped out. And
it's a reality TV show.
You're picking up their hearts and putting them back in and going, we're going to be okay. And then the season starts. Everyone's excited because they want to get a good start. And then the season comes where guys start getting called up, which means some guys are not getting called up.
Yeah.
So now they're upset. Now they want to get traded. They want to get out, And then the trade deadline comes, and of course nothing happens. So then you got to pick up the pieces again. But so anyways, we're talking in the leadership group, and we had a team meeting, and Jude sits up. He goes, because some guys are up and line up, down line. He goes, one thing that I've learned is you need to bloom where you're planted. And I'm like, explain. He's like, well, it doesn't matter. If you're in the fourth line, be the best fourth line guy you can be. If you're in the second line, and that has stuck with me. Just blooming where you're planted and being the best version that you can be in that role. And that's something that can be applicable to life, and as a husband, as a father, as a coach, whatever. Just blooming where you're planted.
I've got one more question, and then we're gonna pass it off to the audience. I look in your bio. Gosh, you have Todd McClellan's your coach in junior. Go to the World Juniors. You get Mike Babcock. Your first NHL game is playing under Mark Crawford. Bob Hartley, you played for on a number of occasions. And I know I'm missing a lot of incredibly accomplished coaches, but given the career that you chose post playing. What are maybe some of the key lessons or things that you've learned from some of these coaches that you had as a player?
So when I was still playing, and I could feel I was running out of gas. It was starting to hurt more. And I was losing my
feels like day 3 of the conference.
The game was getting faster and I was going slower, So, but I had this passion to coach and teach and still stay in the game. So I started to reach out before. I was still playing. One piece of advice I got is look for a job when you have a job. It's better.
That is good advice.
Great advice.
Write that down, young man.
Write that down. That's right. So I'm like, okay, what do I got to do? So I called Todd McClellan, and I'm like, I want to coach. He's like, all right, well, what are you going to do? I'm like, I don't know. What do I got to do? So he gave me a bunch of advice. He's like, do you know how to do video? I said, no clue. He goes, well, you're going to be doing a lot of video. So I ended my last year in Portland, and I sat down with a video guy for a month. That's what we did.
No way.
I learned how to break down a tape. I went to the Roger Nielsen clinic when I was still playing. I'm like, I'm just going to go and see what coaches learn. I played the game, but I've never been in that other room. It's a completely different room. I know that now. I didn't really realize it. But so being proactive and just doing those things that, if it's something you're passionate about or you love about, you got to go learn, experience that, right? And so I learned, and I called Mike Babcock, what do you think? And he gave me some more advice. And so you just try to piece this together. Do you have a resume? I'm like, no. What do you write? He's like, well, don't talk about your stats. I don't have a lot of stats, right? So I'm like, that's a good call, but talk about your leadership. A good idea. You know what I mean? Because usually coaches are in a leadership position. So those are the things you try to bring to light. And it was, you talk about, changing roles coming out of junior. You're a high scorer. I won 2 World Juniors. Actually, it was under 18 team also. Team Canada, we won a gold medal there also. So I was 3 for 3.
Not bad.
Thinking, man, I'm ready for the big time. I got to my first camp with Joe Sakic and Ray Bork, or Ray wasn't there, sorry, but that crew, Peter Forsberg, and I was like, wow. I felt like I was ready. I wasn't even close. I was not even close. It was 4 years in the minors, so I finally got a sniff. But I'm so glad I went through that process, and to go through that was it helped me get there, and you had to work for it, you had to fight for it, and so taking all these steps of growing and being patient, we always want things now. I think that's just kind of culture, right? Like it's instant. If your internet's running slow, I remember dial-up internet. You could hear the sound. Like I remember, like now, if you're like banging on your phone, it's like I want it now. And sometimes it's like slow down, because there truly is no substitute for the experiences you're going to go through. Every season will have a different storyline, and you think you're ready for all of it. I can tell you, in year 2 as a head coach at Columbus Blue Jackets, I did not predict over 500 man games lost. I did not. I'm like, maybe 150, 200. We had a guy that we had signed in the minors, and I'm like, man, if he plays 8 or 10 games, we're probably in trouble. He played 53 for me.
Okay.
So again, you don't know, but I think I could have handled it differently. So it's all these things that you're juggling and going through, and that'll serve you well moving forward as for your next opportunity.
True story. Everybody's got their notebooks out. Who wrote "Bloom Where You Were Planted" in the notebook? Look at that. I bet you did. DJ, where are you? He's got the green box. There you. Okay. Remind me how this works.
They have a question and we throw it to them.
And you can talk into it, right?
Yeah.
You talk into the box. Okay.
Talk in the box.
All right. I'm going to let you throw it. You got a better arm. Any questions? Rick, go right there.
So in the NHL, if you don't win the Stanley Cup, how do you determine if your team is a success?
That's subjective, right? So, and this is where there's a lot of opinions that you have to be able to sift through. So you have fans, you have social media, you have ownership, you have your management group, you have your coaching staff. So real important at the beginning of the year to make sure we're all, and these are the conversations you have in July and August. What are the expectations? And I've learned you have to ask that directly from when we're all meeting, from the coaches, from the management, and then we'll line that up at the end. Did we overachieve or not? But if you're asking that question at the end and we didn't discuss it at the beginning, it's totally up for interpretation. So, and again, there's no emotion in July and August, right? So you think a lot clearer, and so does management, and so does all these things, developing players, and because in the NHL now, we truly are developing all the time.
Yeah.
It never used to be that way. It was like you go to the minors and you play your 3 or 4 years, and then we add a couple players, and that's how we do it.
It's salary cap now. You need that young
Salary
money,
cap's
right?
totally different
Yeah.
world. So you're living in that world.
Yeah.
So the conversations were really nice, but then when you start losing and you're losing and you're losing, all of a sudden the pressure comes, right? You feel the squeeze. You see it in your general manager. You see it in the owners, depending how involved they are. The fans are irritated. We're paying $150 to watch this garbage, so it's like breathe. But if you have a clear definition of what that looks like, and now every organization is going to have different expectations for sure. I mean, there's just teams that are ahead of others. But going through this through experience, get a very clear picture of what that looks like, so at the end of the year we can talk about it objectively, rather than emotionally. I don't know if that answers your answer. Yeah. Okay.
What parts of hockey do you feel are similar or translate to your faith?
That's a good question. I've never had that question. That's a good one. Well, I would say now I'm learning the art of patience. With my walk with the Lord, I can say He has challenged me in patience. And there's another word that follows that patient endurance. As a player, I was always in a hurry, but I was forced to be patient. 4 years. 4 years felt like 10 years in the minors, right? Like I felt like I was ready, but I wasn't ready. And then I realized the value of waiting. So I would say patience is something that I'm still learning. But the patient endurance and carrying that forward, and not only in my faith, but in my coaching philosophy, with my kids, my marriage, all these things, like that patience would be probably paramount for me.
I just wanted to maybe 2 questions. First of all, I have a lot of respect that you're very open about your faith. So the first question is, you see a lot of other pro sports, football, basketball, baseball, and you have a lot of emphasis, pregame chapels. I know some people that are involved in these, and I've always asked them, like, why doesn't hockey have that? And do you feel that that's something that maybe they should start looking at? It's all volunteer. You come if you want. It's no pressure. Do you think if you kind of took the model from some of these other sports, if it would affect or help the trajectory of a way a franchise or a team would go?
Well, that's a loaded question. And here's the thing I can say about my journey in faith. It's very personal. Every individual in here, it's going to be a personal journey. the timing of when it happened to me and what went on, and I had some incredible people. My last year pro, so I'll kind of answer it halfway right now. Hockey Ministries International, they're very involved in the NHL, and they're with most NHL teams. I don't know if all of them, but pretty close, where they have a chaplain, and completely voluntary. There's no, if you want to go, you can. That's how I really got involved. I had a lot of curiosity and questions about God and faith, and because I didn't know much about it. My last year pro, I'd gone back to the minors because I got traded to Anaheim in 2009, 8-9, and then 9-10 I went to Portland to give it one. I missed the whole year. I had hip surgery and double sports hernia surgery again, so I missed the whole year. So I went there, and then I played with a gentleman who stood up after camp and said, hey, Hockey Ministries is going to be coming every Thursday. The American League's more scheduled that way. It's a lot of weekend-loaded games. So if you want to come, you can come. So I went, and to be totally honest, I hated it the first time. I'm like, nope, not going back to that. 2 weeks later, I went back, and then I went back again. So the timing was right for me, I guess. I don't know. And I had a peer that I could go, all right, he talks different, he walks different. He was a tough guy, which really helped. He probably could have beat the tar out of me. So I'm like, that's cool. He loves God, and he could beat the hell out of me. So that, for me, worked. Now, as far as, will that help you? I don't know. I would never push my faith on anybody. I don't think that's, and I don't think that's what you're asking or saying. Do I see a value in it? Absolutely. I'm a walking testimony of just by God's grace. So for me, I'm very passionate about that. I'm very open about it now. I do believe I have been, I wouldn't say the word blackballed, but I've been questioned about it for sure, but it's okay. I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried if it threatens somebody or if that's okay. I actually, and this is what I said to him earlier, I actually understand. I lived most of my life without God in it. I know why I was resistant. I know what caused me to be resistant, so I know it could scare a lot of folks, and so for that I can respect. And I've been questioned in interviews where there's no way they should be asking those questions, and they asked them, and I answered them, and that's okay.
First off, thank you for speaking on everything we're doing. As a young coach, I'm interested in becoming a head coach at some point in my life in the near future. My question for you is, at the national level or professional level, have you faced any hurdles wearing different hats, being a head coach to assistant coach, back to head coach? And if so, did you keep the same coaching style through both positions, or do you have any variations from both positions?
Well, I think that the role, so then you got two pro levels, right? Like you have the American League, assistant coach, head coach, and then you got the NHL, and I've done all four of those roles. They're definitely two different hats. There is no question, from head coach to assistant coach. When you're the head coach, you're the one having the direct conversations. You know, if I'm sitting the player out, we're having the conversation. It's very easy around the table in the morning when we're having our coffee to go, yeah, get him out of the lineup. He sucked last night. He's no good. You know, You have that. But I'm not delivering the message. I'm the assistant coach. I go back and I go, yeah, I can't believe they sat him out when you talk to the kid. You know what I mean? Like, you can play the good guy, right? So I don't know what he's thinking either, but let's sit down and watch some video. You know what I mean? So it's two completely different roles. And I really love both of them for different reasons. As a head coach, I just love the challenge of bringing a group together. If it ever happens again, I think I'm better equipped for that. If it doesn't, I'm okay with that. I really am. I'm not chasing it. That's one thing I would say to everybody: don't chase it. You chase it, you're going to make more mistakes along the way. Bloom where you're planted, right? Just do your good job where you're at, and if it comes, it comes. But as assistant role, I really enjoy it too, because I don't have to take all the GM's calls at night. I don't have to have the owners' meetings. I don't have to have those hard conversations, and I don't mind conflict and hard conversations. But the one thing you realize, you're affecting people's lives daily. They have families too, and so on the performance side, I'm like, you're out, you're not playing, it's crushing them, and that's hard to watch. As assistant coach, you kind of get to be the, hey, it's all right, we're going to work on this. It's not the end of the world, and so both roles, you got to feel kind of what you're suited for, you know. And sometimes you got to try a role to know, no, I think I'm better back here. And it's okay to take a back seat, you know. You need great leaders, but you also need a great support system. Without the support system, the leader means nothing anyway. And really, a lot of times, it's the ego and the pride that says, I want to be the head coach, you know. What's your why? You know, why do you want to be the head coach? I think that's an important question that only you can answer. And when you do that, make sure you're accountable and honest to yourself why you want it. If it's for the money or the paycheck or the notoriety. Everything else comes with it, though. With all those three things comes the scrutiny, you know, the firing, the less job security. So there's a balance to both. So just understand why you want to do it, and I think you'll answer that question yourself. But don't be afraid to tackle a role either. You know, go after it.
Brad, this is the best, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Let's give it up for Brad Larsen. Thank you.